All right, today is episode 3 on this 60408 stroker deal for GNR. Stay with us and we're going to get into it. All right, so what we're doing today is we got the crank in the balancer, and we're going to go over all like how we balance and how we build the bob weight and all that stuff, because in the last few balancing videos I didn't go like super duper in depth on that part, and a bunch of people were asking, so hopefully this will answer all of those questions. So we've got a 4-inch stroke Molnar crankshaft, we've got a 24 tooth reluctor, we've got a set of IR H-beam connecting rods. We've got these nice custom Wiseco pistons that they made for us for this deal because of the goofy bore size. We've got we got the GFX rings, we got spiral locks, we got wrist pins. So we're going to get all of this stuff weighed up. We're going to show you how we weigh it, the software in the computer, how it calculates everything, and then we'll go from there. So have you weighed all this stuff? Okay. So and there's another thing too. So every piece of this assembly has to be weighed. And the GFX rings are always a stainless top ring to just handle that heat, and this thing's going to be a forced induction deal, so it'll have a Napier second and then a stainless steel top, and that's pretty much the standard go-to on any of this boosted LS small block, big block stuff. That's the ring package pretty much everybody uses. All right, so that's the ring pack. We got to weigh it. And then did you find the support rails? So because of the, here we go. All right, these are the support rails. So because of the wrist pin height, so when you add stroke to the system, and even if you know, some people like with a small block Chevrolet, you're gonna add stroke and add a longer rod. So what happens, I mean, a lot of people know this, some people don't, so this is for the crowd that just don't know. So you can see the wrist pin is in the oil ringland. It has broke into the oil ringland. So this is what happens. I mean, you only got X amount of deck height, and you can see how far down the first ring is. So when you're in a boosted application or a severe duty application with a lot of cylinder pressure, you know, you got to get that ring down some, and then you want enough distance between the rings so the second ring land is not, you know, like it's not thin here where it'll break out. But then, so from the top to the second ring, that area is thick, but if you look, you know, here's the second ring land, and it don't see the pressure that the top ring does, but you can see how thin it is. So what happens in a sure enough application, it'll break that second ring land off. Just the pressure, it'll just break it off. So this is why, you know, some deals are just it's hard to get enough stroke and enough rod length and all of that, and that's why you know, I see people all the time hollering, you know, a longer rod is worth more power. and it's really just not the case. I mean, it's been dyno tested 58,000 times, and it just don't make any difference. But what does make a difference is sacrificing this piston land area just to run a longer rod because somebody on the internet told you that it made more power. So it would be advantageous to run a shorter rod and a better ring package than it would be to run a long rod with you know, a deal like this. Now on the LS platform, there's just not much you can do because you need that rod length to clear the crank counterweight. So, you know, this is about the minimum of the package that you can do with this application. But some other stuff, you know, there's room to have a shorter rod and a longer piston and so on and so forth. So, but back to the support rail. So these things, this support rail goes on, and it's like just a thin ring, but it's steel. And so this goes on and lays in the bottom of that O-ring groove to bridge that gap. So now the oil scraper and expander can sit on this rail. So that's how that works. And you got to have this weight. So generally what I do, come over here to the computer. So and our software has it, so it actually has a place for the support rail. But because it's part of the piston weight, which is part of the reciprocating weight, it just really don't matter. So normally I just put the rings and the support rail all together and I weigh them as one unit. So we'll just take and weigh this whole package together, and that's 37.5 grams. So instead of just even fooling with that, we'll just go to piston ring weight and we'll just call it 37.5, enter. And then we won't even worry about a support rail weight, and it'll take care of itself. Andrew has already weighed, so we got the rod weight total, then we weigh the big end, and let me show you how we do that, because that's been a question too. So we take our little fixture, we zero our scale, and then we can take, because we need to know, so we can lay the rod on and get the total rod weight, and then we can put it on the hanging fixture and get just the big end weight, and then we can just minus the big end from the total to know the pin end weight. And then we can check it and confirm it, but at the end of the day, this is how we measure that system. So that gives us the big end, and then we can just take all of this off, zero it, and then we can just lay the rod on, and we can get a total weight, and then that'll give us, with a little math, that'll give us a pin end, because we've got to have, with most engines, we're going to have all of the rotating and 50% of the reciprocating. So we're going to have the two big ends, because you got two rods on one journal. We're going to have two big ends, two rod bearings. We're going to have, and then all of one cylinder. So the pin end, the piston, the rings, the wrist pin, the locks, the support rail, and then usually we add, depending on what we're doing, 3 to 5 grams for oil into the system, and then all of that together, and we can change for, some. We're not going to get all into it, but some people, as far as the reciprocating weight goes, they'll change it. They'll not use 50%. They might use 49 or 52 or whatever secret super sauce they got today. But for general, normal V8 stuff that we do, 50% is the number that we use. So we've got all of the data is in, and it gives us a bob weight. And this is, I mean, it's pretty light. Some stuff comes in over 1800. I see some 1820, 1830 stuff. Just depends on the piston and the rod. Some rods is heavy, some pistons are a little heavier than others. But, you know, 1800 or under is really good, and I'm going to show you why in a minute. So now we got to build the, did we get the, let me see, make sure everything, yep. So now we got to build the bob weight, and just because of the scale, we always build the bob weight in halves. So it gives us a total bob weight and a half, and the bob weight comes apart in two pieces. So we're going to build each half to that 895 gram, you know, give or take a half a gram to get us there. So we'll take, all right, we'll take the nut, and where do we want to be? 897, so we're a little heavy. All right, here we go, we're about to get there. Alright, so once we, 897, so I mean that's 897 and a half, so. Alright, so what we normally do is once we get one built, generally speaking, we can just look at what we got on there and then duplicate it, and it's normally really, really close. But I mean, we're gonna check it obviously, but so we'll just leave that one there for reference. So we got 5 of the big ones. And then we got 4 of these. Oh, hair puppy. Alright, so there's the first one. And that is number 1. So we'll come over. And then we're going to square these up, but we're just going to get them on for the time being, but we'll get them squared up once we get everything set. But they need to be in the middle of the journal and oriented in time with 0. So that takes just a little bit of doing, but it ain't the end of the world. All right, so hopefully you see how that works. And then I'm gonna get all these built. And then once they're all built, we'll come over to the crank and we'll show you how to get them in time, or how we get them in time. All right, so we got the shaft, the keyway is straight up and down, and we have zeroed because this is like a rotary indicator, so it gives us degrees. So we zeroed it in the software, so if we move the crank, we can always come back to 0. And then I just take a digital profilometer and we just zero it on the bed. Not a profilometer, a digital protractor, sorry. And then we'll bring and we'll just get it as close to zero as we can. And then we make sure that we are relatively centered in the journal. All right, give me I don't think it, does it fit? It does. All right, and then we will rotate, and we'll just use this one as our reference. Well, actually, we can just look at the dude on the screen, so that's 90. All right, let me make sure we centered. All right, so and I don't know what it's going to say till we spin it, but a bunch of these, well, actually all of these cranks that, well, you know what, let's just spin it before I tell that story and it'll make more sense, I hope. Put a little lube on the bearings. All right, here we go. Man, that's going to town right there. I got some windage. Okay, so, yep. All right, so so on the right side, you know, right is right, left is left. On the right side, we need some holes here, and then on the left side, we need a hole right here. So if you notice, and I may drag one out for reference, but if you notice, there are no holes in this crankshaft. Zero rough balancing has been done. Now, if you hang loose, let me drag one out. This is straight out of the box. This is a K1 crankshaft. Now, I don't care if it's a K1 or a Scat or an Eagle or whatever. I mean, you can just shake them all up in a hat and pick one out and it's all the same junk. So, if you look, we got holes, 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 more holes. And notice that the holes are down here off of the end counterweights. So you know, again, I've said it before, and we'll talk about it in a minute. But you want the balancer is only seeing this counterweight and this counterweight. There's already not enough weight in the center of the crank, so the crank wants to whip. You know, I don't know if you understand that or not, but the crank, you know, under a lot of power boost, cylinder pressure, that crank, as it goes through its cycle, that crank will just it'll whip. And the more weight we can get toward the center, the better that whipping is. So that's why we try to always only correct on the end journals. Now, if it's super duper close and I need to make a little peck, you know, on a second journal or something just to get there without having to add Mallory or something, you know, that's fine probably. But if it's a high end deal, you know, a performance, you know, either we're just gonna put some Mallory in it or whatever we got to do to correct the but what these places are doing, and this is what I don't understand, and this is the beautiful thing about Moner, is they're rough balancing this thing to 1,800 grams. So that's beautiful if it works out like this one and it's under 1,800 grams, or you're doing a, you know, a LS1, a 5.3, something with a small piston that's going to be really light, or like a, you know, we use them a lot, like a scat I-beam rod. It's a lot lighter, and so that all of that equals a lighter bob weight. So you can get, if your crank's already balanced to 1,800 and you've got a 1,830 bob weight, you're screwed on day one. So now we've got to take the crank that we just paid $700, $800, $900 for and put $200 or $300 worth of heavy metal in it to balance it, which is just absolute insanity to me. I mean, it's like being on a diet and eating triple cheeseburgers 3 times a day. It just don't make no sense. So why they do that, I have absolutely no idea, because all this is doing is just making the machinist job harder. Because what happens if you spin this thing up and it needs some weight taken out halfway between this hole and a hole that don't exist? Well, now you got to move over here, move over there, and cheat, and, you know, do all this aggravating nonsense. Whereas if we had 0 holes, then we could just drill it where it needed to be drilled and move on. But, you know, when you got this mess, you know, looks like Swiss cheese, it just looks like garbage, and then we got to make it look like garbage some more. You know, I've seen it multiple times where you got to put a piece of Mallory right where a hole is. So now you're going through a hole to put a piece of, I mean, it's just junk. And I've talked to them, and they don't care. It's just, well, that's the way we do it. And what it really boils down to is, you know, they're all buying these things from across the pond. And so they've already got a system in place, and to get that system changed is really complicated more than likely. It's not just pick up the phone and, you know, tell Chow Yin to stop drilling holes in the crankshaft. I mean, that's just how it is. So the beautiful thing is a bunch, and used to, way back, Tom Owner was having his done that way too, and a bunch of machinists said, hey man, just let's stop drilling holes in the crank. It's just, you know, it just make our job easier. So he stopped drilling holes in the crank, and now we've got a clean slate. We can balance this thing, we can put the holes where they need to be, and it's done. No, you know, crazy stuff. And another thing, if you look, so this, you know, we built it all up and we spun it, and so that's about the center of the 2 holes. So if you look, you know, we like right here, so we'll have 2 holes right here. Now, it's not perfectly in line with the journal, obviously, but it's pretty close. So, and I, you know, again, I ain't a crankshaft designer. I'm just making stuff up, but I like to see, and I think it makes sense, the closer that the heavy condition is to being in line with the rod throw, tells me that the counterweight placement is closer to being where it needs to be, right? Because, you know, when a crankshaft is designed, All of these counterweights can be rotated on their center axis to put the weight where it needs to be. And I see other brands will spin them, and it's like it wants me to drill a hole way over here. So if it's heavy over here, then obviously that counterweight is way in the wrong place. And I haven't done it, but I really want to lay some like side by side and just look at the counterweight location, because it's got to be different, because I see it all the time where, you know, we'll just build the bob weights and spin it, and you know, it doesn't matter what the bob weight is. Its location is in the same place. I mean, it's on the rod throw, it's centered. So how in the world you get, you know, an out of balance over here? You know, the machine's telling me, hey, we need to drill a hole right here in the air where nothing exists. Then obviously that counterweight has got to be just not clocked on that crankshaft correctly. And so some of that stuff, you know, just it's stuff that we see, and it makes my head hurt. And I don't, you know, again, I'm not a crankshaft designer, so I don't know, but it's really odd when that stuff is way off like that. So having said that, we got our numbers, we know what we need to do, we've got this thing set, so it'll tell us how deep and how big around, and all of that happens right here. So we go to drill setup, and I got to fix these radiuses, but we got a max depth set and we got a diameter for the drill bit set. And usually on all these LSs, I generally drill them with a 1/2 inch drill, because the counterweights are so thin. And like on other stuff, you know, like small block, big block, the first and last journal, I mean, it's thick, super thick. So we'll drill them with like a 1 inch drill. So let me get all my tooling set up, and then we'll make these corrections. And all in all, let me exit out of here. All in all, if you look, so on the left side, we 20 grams out, and on the right side, we 42 grams out. A stock crankshaft, if you balance a stock crankshaft, it'll be that bad out straight out of the gate. So, and it's already been balanced at the factory. So having said that, you know, 20 grams and 40 grams on a crankshaft with absolutely 0 holes in it is really good. I balanced some stock small block Chevrolets, like late model stuff, Vortec, and they'll be out that much and that much straight from the factory, going back with all the components that come out of that engine, the same crank, the same rods, and a replacement piston that's within a couple of grams of the factory piston that was in it, and it'll be that bad. So that, I mean, we would never do it, but that will run. But you know, we would never do that. But all right, let me get everything set up, and then we're gonna start drilling holes. All right, so you know, these things are forged chromoly steel, so they're a little tough to drill. But we use, and some people use some fancy exotic stuff, but I found that screw machine bits, we use screw machine bits in almost everything that we do, just because they're short, rigid, 135-degree point, they're split point. You don't, generally speaking, you don't need to spot drill the hole before you drill it. They're just so short and rigid, they'll just go on without trying to run off the road. We have, with the edge finder, we found Y0, so we know where the center line of the crank is. And then, you know, generally we just eyeball the counterweight to get in the center of it. So, all right, so it's lit up. If you watch the picture, it'll show you, like when we get, once we're in line where we need to be on the correct degree, it'll turn green, and you can see that it's telling us to drill at 11 degrees, and we are at 11 degrees. And it wants me to go 1 inch and 220 deep. So normally what I do, and it's pretty, I mean, it's pretty doggone accurate, but just like all things in life, you know, we'll go like 1 and 200 deep on both of them holes, and then we'll go like 1 and 200 deep on that hole, and then we'll spin it again, because whatever you do on this side affects this side, and whatever you do on this side affects this side, and it's easier just to sneak up on it than it's trying to get it all on the first shot, and you know what I'm saying. And then so like where we at now, we'll just call that X0. That way when we come back, if we have to drill in the same hole, you know, we just don't have to hunt it. We know where we at. And the crank's been, you know, like cam cut, so it's right on where that cam cut's been. So, you know, sometimes if it tries to walk around, we have to come back and clamp the crank in place. But maybe it'll be all right. Some more than others. I'm just checking my Z depth to make sure my drill ain't moved in the chuck. And that's 1 inch and 200. And then we'll come over to our second hole. And we got a re-zero on Z because, you know, the crown's coming up on this side. It's lower here than it is here. And there's the inch deep. Did I get you? Yeah. And then there's 200. Alright, so that's that side. And then we're going to come over here. And if you notice the way the imbalance was, it tracks. It's in the same place on the front counterweight that it was on the back counterweight, but it's just the back counterweight was, or you know, this portion of the crank was a little lighter than this portion of the crank, so that's how that pans out. We're gonna go Z0, and we gotta go 1 and 200 basically. right, so we got it to 1 and 200. Now we got to get all of these chips off.
Ooh, that hurts my ears.
Hurts my ears too. We should have on earplugs. I hear a chicken.
Yeah. I'm over here without earplugs.
Yeah, you don't have any safety ear protection. It's very. All right, so we're gonna spin this thing and see where we at. And remember, we was 25 grams in the front and 49.9 in the back. 24.9 in the front, 49.9 in the back. All right, so now we 2.8 grams in the front and 4 grams in the back. So we're just gonna look and see. So it's telling us that we're 4 grams right here, and then we are 2 grams right here. Now here's where some, and I might put my foot in my mouth, but sometimes we can cheat some things. So it wants me to drill a new hole right here just a little bit, and then it wants me to drill a new hole over here. So it's possible sometimes, like we can put it back in the same hole, drill a little bit in the same hole, and it'll move because it's all relative. It'll move this side possibly closer to these original holes. I can't 110% say it's gonna do that, but we're gonna give it a try just a little bit and see what happens. Because I like to have the least amount of holes possible in my crankshaft if I can help it. And whatever it's telling us, it's telling us 116 deep, but it's gonna take a lot more than 116 because we already so far down. So that radius that we're moving the weight from, 2 ounces way down here it'd probably take, a quarter of that up here to do the same thing. Let's just see what that did. I went like 50 deep in the hole that already existed. It brought it over some, but it didn't get us where we want to be. I hate that. Alright, so we're just gonna make another hole, much as I don't want to. 110. Alright, so it wants a little bitty one right there. That ain't too bad. That ain't too bad. All right, so Z0, 156 deep. Man, we close. We super close. Super duper. All right, so we got it all hemmed up, and we ended up with just those two holes and that little peck, and then one hole and a little peck right there. And so that got us to 0.76 and 0.78 grams left and right. And what's more critical, and I think I've addressed this in another balancing video, but I'm going to address it again just because it matters. People get obsessed with zero balance, and zero balance is just an absolute fallacy. What's more important is that the left and the right are the same versus this number being zero. And I mean, I don't know what a really accurate balancer. I doubt you'll ever get to zero. If you know, if it just pops up zeros, your balancer's probably not very accurate, just because I mean, it's just hard to get to zero. But we've got some stuff down to like 0.2 of a gram, but getting much beyond that, you just start kind of chasing your tail because there's too much. I mean, there's just mechanical noise and all of that. So, you know, to finding that perfection is, and the reason that the zero doesn't matter, and I've said this before, and I'm going to say it again for the folks in the back of the class, there is oil raining all over this rotating assembly. It's just raining all over it. So we put some weight in for oil. The issue is it's not the same amount of oil front and back, and you know, during a run there's different amounts and it's all over the place. So even if you get zeros, real zeros, it's not zero in the engine. So we just want to make it front to back as close as possible, and you know, I mean, as low as possible. I mean, anything probably under 5 grams is just fine. You wouldn't know the difference between if that said 5 grams or it said 0.5 grams. You just, nobody'd ever know. But again, the customer's paying for a job, so we're trying to get it, you know, in a reasonable range that everybody feels good about. So I try to shoot for, on high performance stuff, under 1 gram, and on just, you know, a basic rebuild, usually we hit them 2 grams, 1.5 grams, somewhere along in there. And it all depends on time. Like, I'm not going to spend 3 days hunting that 0.5 gram, you know. So having said all of that, this is why this crank is superior to this crank, because like I said, you know, you already got all this Swiss cheese going on, and then you trying to balance it, and who knows what, where, and how. But let's, I'll tell you what we're gonna do. We're gonna pop this crank out of the balancer since we done. I'm gonna deburr the holes, and we're gonna pop this thing out and set it side by side, because I've spun this one already for another job, and it was going to end up needing a bunch of Mallory, and I'm just not going to do it. So I talked to the customer, and let's just get them on her, and there we are. But I want to set them side by side and just look at the orientation of the counterweights and just see what that looks like. All right, so there's, you know, I mean, you see it on the interweb all the time. You know, everybody's like, well, all the cranks are made in China, so they're all the same crank. It's just people are putting them in. The dog's over there just yawning right in the middle of my video over here. You know, everybody says they're the same. It's the same forging. It all come from the same place. Blah blah blah, and there's just another name on it, right? And so I've heard that 1,000 times, and I've actually never done this. I don't know why. I should have, but I haven't. So. The actual, so this is I think, and again, I ain't laid them side by side either, but I've seen this is a K1, it's marked K1, and somebody ground it off. So this is a K1, it come in a Liberty box. I've seen the Liberty, I've seen a Scat. The Scat, the Liberty, and the K1 appear to be the same forging. The motor is a different forging. Not only is it a different forging, it is slightly smoother, and the color is a little different. But the one big thing that I see is, I don't know, look straight down on that crank. So you can see, if you watch this cutout here and how this counterweight is oriented, and then come straight over here. So this is actually at a different angle. So like it's almost cocked a little bit, because both of them straight ahead. This one, this counterweight is rotated, and this counterweight is rotated. And then if we, excuse me, if we come down here and just look, you know, like head on, you can see this center chunk is a little more, in this area, it's a little more robust than this one is. And there's just some variances, especially like in the milling on the face of the journals is smoother than it is on this one. And like I say, I could just see, you know, some obvious differences that tell me that they did not come out of the same forging dies for sure. Just the way some of it is. And like I say, you can see that the counterweights are clocked slightly different, not way a bunch, but they are slightly different. And I find that these, for the most part, balance a little more centered than some of the other versions. So, you know, I'm not trying to sell you a Molnar crank. You know, I ain't got a dog in the hunt, but at the end of the day, I just feel like that this is less work than this, because it never fails. You know, when you're trying to balance, you got all these holes to contend with. Plus, most of the time, this is going to be, it's going to need Mallory. If you're doing anything over a 4-inch bore, most of the time this is going to need Mallory. And one other thing that I was going to check is that counterweight thickness. What did I do with my calipers? These ain't no good ones, but roughly, we like 830. It's about the same. That one is 700. Yeah, the thicknesses are roughly the same, within 10 thousandths, but so anyway, that's the story, and that job's done. But like I say, just the takeaway is, you know, you don't always get what you pay for. I mean, all of these cranks are within a few bucks of one another, and you can see the difference. And again, if I had any other brand, it would be just like that one. They already got holes in them. Eagle, Scat, Callie's Comp Star, they all already got holes in them. So, so that's the story. You know, it balanced out good. It didn't take a whole lot, and we was able to get under a gram, get both ends even, and I think that's, you know, more than adequate for anything we're gonna be doing. So we still got on this engine, we got a file fit ring, set the bearing clearances, and we need to go through the heads and touch them up. There's some spark plug holes and some stuff need some attention. So be on the lookout for that episode. Hopefully we'll get to that next week. But if you got any balancing questions, feel free to put them in the comments. We thank you so much. We'll see you on the next one.